Hi everyone, today we are going to discuss about the environment variables in Kubernetes. So the first question comes, why we need to implement environment variables in Kubernetes? Let's take example, we are creating a pod, okay? The pod name is pod 1, okay? And we need to connect this pod 1 to our database configuration. To connect to our database configuration, I would say we need two things. One, it is our username, and the second one is the password, okay? So how we are going to mention this username and password while creating the pod. So to implement this one, we have a concept of environment variables, and in this pod configuration, we are going to mention env and then good to pass the values. Basically, we have the three types of environment variables. One, it is called as plain key. The second one is called as config map, and the third one is secret. Let's do a quick demo on the plain key. Then we are going to discuss about the other two options. Okay. So for this demo, I have already created a cluster name called as lab-aks. Let me quickly connect to this cluster. So I'll copy the subscription ID. We'll open the terminal and I'm going to paste it. And then I will copy the cluster credentials. And then we'll open the Visual Studio Code. So we'll create a file name called as plainenv.yaml. Okay. I'm going to copy the configuration here. If you see here in this plain env.yaml, what we are trying to achieve, we are trying to create a pod and the name of the pod is plain and the container name is C1 and this is the image which we are going to use. And these are the three values which we have passed. And in this, if you see in the env column, the first hyphen, the second hyphen and the third hyphen, which means we are passing three values. This one is a key and the value. Same thing, it will be key and this one is value, this one is a key and this one is a value. Okay, let me quickly create a pod. We'll copy the path, paste it here. Let me clear the screen. I'm going to run a command called kubectl create -f and my YAML file name is plaineNV.yml. Okay, let me run kubectl get pod and see my pod is in running state. So while creation of the pod, we have mentioned these three environment variables. So what we are going to do, we are going to log in inside this container and then we will run the command called env and then we are going to cross check whatever the environment variables we have mentioned at the time of creation, is it reflecting inside our pod or not. One more thing, sometime I'm mentioning about the pod and sometime I'm mentioning about the container. Okay, but in this case, we are only creating a container name called as C1. So both of the things are the same. So do not confuse. If you see, the command is kubectl exec -it, my pod name and --bash. Inside the pod, I'm going to mention env. If you see here, we have all the three environment variables. The first one is MySQL-root underscore password. The second one is MySQL-user and the third one is MySQL underscore password. So this is the straightforward way of setting up the environment variable in Kubernetes. Okay. The second option which we have discussed is ConfigMap. So in real-time scenario, we are not going to have only three values. We are going to have around 10 plus values. So this approach, it would be complicated to pass the values, to pass all the key and values inside the pod. So we have a concept of config map In ConfigMap, what we are going to do, we are going to create a config map which has all the key and the value, and then this config map is going to eject inside the pod. Okay, and at the creation of the pod time, we are going to mention about the environment, I would say environment from config map reference. Okay, let's do a quick demo. I'll come outside of this pod, and then I'm going to run this command to delete this pod. As we have discussed, to implement the config map, the first stage it would be to create a config map where we are going to have our key and values. And the second stage, while creation of the pod, this config map will be injected. Okay, so let me quickly create a config map. I'll clear my screen. If you see here, the command is kubectl create cm, means this is my config map name, and these are the key and value. Again, from literal it is mentioned, then key and value. Same, it is for here key and the value. So config map is really great when you want to pass n number of key and values. Okay, so, so one of the main benefit of the config map is really great to pass n number of keys and values. And all the key and the values are going to pass in the form of map. That's why it is called as config map. So our config map has been created. I'm going to run a command called kubectl get cm, and see our config map has been created and it has 3 data. And to describe the config map, the command is kubectl describe cm and the this is our config map name is con, and these are the data. The MySQL root password is this one, MySQL user is this one, MySQL password is this one. Okay. So the next thing which we need to do, we need to create one YAML file. And in this YAML file, what we are going to do, we are going to create a pod. If you see here, the kind is pod and the name of this pod is CM. And here we are creating a container name called as C1, and this is the same image which we have used in plain environment. But in this case, what we are doing, we have mentioned env from, and then it is mentioned as config map reference. And what is the name of my config? Name is conf. Okay, and this one we are rejecting. So the same thing which we have discussed. The first one, we are going to create our config map, and then this config map is going to be injected inside our pod. So the main benefit, if you compare with the plain key, here we do not need to mention all this key and value. So we are good to declare or to mention all our key and values inside this config map, and in the pod configuration we only need to call it. Okay, let me quickly create the pod. So the command it would be kubectl create -f and my file name. And see, our pod has been created. I will mention kubectl get pods. See, our pod has been running. So again, what we are going to do, we are going to log in inside the pod, which name as cm. And see, I'm going to mention a command called env. If you see, we have all the three values: MySQL root password, MySQL password, and MySQL user. So quick comparison between the plain key and the config map. In plain key, we pass the key and the values in the pod configuration only, while in the case of config map, we only need to call the config map configuration. And then at the runtime, all the values will be updated inside the pod as an environment variable. Okay. So the last one which we have discussed is secret. So till now we had a very detailed discussion like regarding the plain key and the config map. But in real time scenario, the way we are passing our username and password, this thing should not be mentioned as a plain text. Okay, this thing should be mentioned as a secret. Okay, so to make it more secure in comparison to the plain text which we are using in plain key and the config map, we need to use secret. The concept of the secret, it would be same which we have discussed in the config map. It would be the same thing. Firstly, we need to create a secret. Okay, and once my secret has been created, so in my pod configuration I'm going to call this secret. Okay, let's do a quick demo to understand it. I'll delete this pod and the config map configuration. So here what I have mentioned, a command called kubectl create. What it is going to create? A secret, a generic secret. The name is sec, and here hyphen hyphen from hyphen literal. This one is a key, this one is a value. Again, this one is a key and the value, and here it is mentioned as key and the value. So eventually it is going to create a secret name called as sec, in which we are going to have the key and the values. Okay, let me press enter. So our secret has been created. I'm going to mention a command called kubectl get secret. It is going to list all the secret. So in kubectl get secret, we are able to see the name of the secret is sec and it has the three data. If I'm going to describe this secret, let's see, are we good to fetch the values or not? If you see here, when you mention a command called kubectl describe secret sec, we are not able to see any value. Okay, why? Because these values are encoded. Okay, while in the case of config map or plain key, the values were stored as a plain text. That's why whenever we were running this command, I would say called describe, we were able to see the values. Okay, then let me quickly create a pod for this configuration. If you see in this YAML file, we are trying to create a pod which name is sec, and this is my container name called as C1, and this is the image. And here what we are doing, we have mentioned env from secret reference and the name is sec. It is the same name of my secret. And then once we are going to create the pod, I would say this is what my secret. There's one typo. Once we are once we are going to create our secret, okay, and then this secret is going to be updated inside our sec pod. Okay, let me run a command called kubectl create -f and my file name. So our pod has been created. So I'm going to log in inside this pod, or I would say container. Right now we have the container name as C1. So we are good to say as a pod or as a container. I'm going to run a command called env and see, we are able to see our MySQL root password, MySQL password, MySQL user. Okay, so with this, we have completed all the three examples. The first one is a plain key where we are passing all the key and the value inside our pod configuration. While in the second case, what we have done, we have created I would say a config map, and then this value is going to be injected inside our pod name called as CM. And the third one which we have discussed called secret. In this, the environment variable, firstly we have created a secret name called as sec, and then this value is going to be injected inside our pod. If you see in the first example, we have mentioned env because we are using plain key. In the second example, we have mentioned env from, and here we are mentioning config map reference. Why? Because we are using config map. In the third one, we have mentioned secret ref. Why? Because we are using secret. So till now, according to our discussion, it seems like the secret is the best one to implement to store all our confidential data. But in real time, the challenge with secret environment variable is it does not use any kind of encryption. Okay. So instead of encryption, it uses, I would say, encoding, which I have mentioned to you. And to encode and decode a data is very easy. That's why in real time scenario, we need to use a third party key vault implementation. In Azure, we have, I would say, Key Vault. In HashiCorp, we have HashiCorp Vault. I would say in AWS, we have KMS to store our key. In this demo, we are going to do a quick demo on our Azure implementation. Okay. So the steps, it would be management in AKS using Key Vault. Okay. So the first thing which we have to do, we have to create a Key Vault. And inside the Key Vault, what we have to do, we have to create one secret. Okay. So this one, it would be our first stage. And the second stage, it would be, we have our AKS cluster. So in our AKS cluster, what we have to do, we have to enable a CSI driver. Okay. This one, it would be our second stage. And this CSI driver is responsible to connect to our AKS cluster. And then in AKS cluster, what we have our virtual machine skill set. And each virtual machine skill set has what? Our managed identity. We have the two types of identity. One is called system assigned, and another one is user assigned. But we are going to use what? A user assigned one. And then this user assigned identity, we need to give access to our Key Vault secret. So this one, it would be our third stage. Okay. So till now, what we have done, we have created our Key Vault, which has the secret. In terms of AKS, we have enabled the CSI driver configuration, which is generally responsible for our secret management configuration. The third stage which we have done at AKS level, we have enabled the MI. Okay. In the third step, what we have done, we have the MI and we have provided the access to our Key Vault secret. Okay. Once this part has been done, next step, it would be to create a secret provider, I would say, class. And then this secret provider class is going to be injected inside our pod. For this one, the step it would be 4, and finally fifth one, it would be pod. And we should be able to see the environment variable value which we have stored inside our secret. So let's quickly create what? Our Key Vault. I'm going to inside the portal, click on home. I'll mention Key Vault. And here I'm going to click on create. say demo hyphen key vault. The name of my key vault it is AKS demo cluster hyphen KV1323. Okay. Then I'm going to click on nest, and then nest. And finally, nest. So I'm ignoring all this configuration. Right now, my focus is to create a key vault. Okay. I'll click on create. So our key vault has been created. So the first thing which I have mentioned in our whiteboard, we need to create our secret. Let me click on secrets. In Azure Key Vault, whenever you create, you need to give the access. By default, it does not provide access to any user. It doesn't matter if the user have the owner level of access at subscription level. Okay, so I'm going to click on add, then add role assignment. I'll mention here Key Vault administrator. Then click on nest. Then I'll select member. I'll mention my name. Create. We'll click on review plus sign. Okay, I'll click on generate, and here my name of my secret is MySQL password, and the value is this 123. Mention, and then I'll click on create. So my password has been created. With this, we have completed this. First stage is done. The next step is to enable the CSI driver in our AKS configuration. As I have mentioned, my AKS name is live-AKS. I will click on settings. Then I'll select security configuration. And here, if you see at the bottom, we have one option which is mentioned integrate Azure Key Vault as secret store with Kubernetes cluster via CSI volume. Okay, what I have to do, I have to enable CSI and then I need to click on apply. So as I have mentioned, to integrate our AKS cluster, this part to our Key Vault, what we have to do, we have to enable this one. and we have implemented this step, so let me mention done here. Okay, so the next step is whatever the virtual machine skill set we have to check the manage identity at the user level, and then this user need to give access to our key vault. So this one is our third step. So to implement the third step, I need to click on setting, and then I have to select properties. And here if you see, we have one dedicated resource group name called as infrastructure resource group. And in this one, we are going to have our virtual machine skill set. Inside this one, we need to click on security, select identity. And here if you see what we have to select, user assigned. And here we have the two MIs are present. One, it is the agent pool label one. And the second one is dedicated for secret provider. So what we have to do, we have to copy this MI ID name, and then let me quickly go inside my key vault. Click on IAM, role settings. We'll select the Key Vault administrator. And here I need to paste the value which I have copied. This one, select, review, assign. So let me quickly go inside my whiteboard. And if you see here, we have done this. So what we have done, we have one user assigned MI which is created by enabling this CSI driver, and we have given access to our key vault, which means we are good to access this key vault from our MI. Okay. So the fourth stage is to create a secret provider class. So I'll close all this YAML file. I have created a YAML file name called as secretproviders.yaml, and in this one, see, the API version is secret store CSI. The kind is secret provider class. The name of this secret provider class name is Azure KV name hyphen system hyphen MSI. The provider is Azure. Here we are using use virtual machine manage identity, which is enabled as true. Here we need to mention the ID of our user assigned ID, and here we need to mention our key vault name. My key vault name is, let me quickly copy this one, paste here. The cloud name is Azure Public Cloud. This is the object name, the same one which we have created secret inside our key vault. See, MySQL hyphen password, and then this object type is secret, and this is the object version. Okay. So what I have to mention here, my MI ID and the tenant ID. So let me firstly mention the tenant ID. If you see an overview here, the directory ID and the tenant ID, both of them are same. We'll mention here. And for my MI ID, I'll click here. The client ID is called as our user assigned identity ID. I'll mention here. Okay. Right now, we are only working on secret. That's why it is mentioned as secret. If we are going to update any key or cert, then we need to mention the key, whatever the key we have, and then object type and object version we are good to ignore. By default, it will fetch the latest. Okay. And this is the tenant ID. And this object is a list, so we are good to pass multiple value. I have initiated a command called kubectl create hyphen app and my YAML file name. See, our secret provider class has been created. So the next step is to create a pod. I'm going to mention here pod.yaml, and in this pod.yaml, I'm going to mention the pod configuration. If you see here, the API version is v1, the kind is pod. This is a metadata, the name of my pod. Here, the name of my container is busybox. This is the image which I'm using. This is a command. We already have very detailed discussion what this command is going to do. So what I have mentioned here, I have mentioned here as volumes, and this is the name of my volume and the CSI provider. Let me open the secret provider class also. Okay, so this one is the name of my volume which I'm going to mount inside the pod. This one is my driver name. One of the most important thing which should match is our secret provider class. So whatever the name we have mentioned here, our secret provider class, it should be same. Okay, so this one, it is going to, if this is my, I would say this is my pod. So in this pod, this volume is going to be mounted. The volume details is Azure hyphen KV name hyphen system hyphen MSI. And in this one, what we have mentioned, the volume mounts, the name is secrets hyphen store 01 hyphen inline, in which path this is going to be mounted on forward slash MNT forward slash secrets hyphen store, and read only is okay. So we already have a very detailed discussion like what is the exact meaning of volumes and how it is going to be mounted in our storage. discussion. Doubts, then please check our storage video. Okay, so I'm going to create a pod. The command is kubectl create -f pod.yaml, and our pod has been created. I'm going to run a command called kubectl get pods. See, our pod has been created and it is in running stage. So we are going to run this command called as kubectl exec. This is my pod name, and this one will print the my key value. Let me press enter. If you see here, we have this value of my secret name called as MySQL password. This value is coming from where? This value is coming from my key. Okay, let me quickly go inside my whiteboard and see. This step is also done, and this one is also done. And when we initiated this command, we are able to see the value of our secret inside the pod, which is updated inside the keyboard. Okay, so let me do a quick recap which we have discussed in today's class. So the first one which we discussed is using a plain key. The plain key, while creation of the pod only, we are going to mention the key and value. The second one which we have discussed is config map. In the config map configuration, what we have done, we have created a config map, and then this config map is going to be injected inside our pod. Okay. The third one which we discussed is secret. Okay. Till now, in the first implementation, I would say, or in the second one, we have passed the secret value using a plain test only, which is not recommended in real-time scenario. So what we have to do, we have to create one secret, and then this secret is going to pass inside our pod. And when we describe the secret, we were not able to see any value. But the challenge with this configuration is, if we are going to use this one, this follow encoding principle. Encoding and I would say decode. So we are good to encode and decode the values. It does not follow any kind of encryption. Okay. So implement, or I would say to store our secret in safer place, we have n number of options. As I have mentioned, in HashiCorp, we have HashiCorp Vault. In AWS, we have KMS, Key Management Services. In Azure, we have Key Vault. Okay, so to implement the Azure Key Vault implementation, what we have done, we have our AKS cluster. In this AKS cluster, we enable the CSI driver, which is responsible to connect to our Key Vault. And then once we enabled our CSI driver, one MI is created, and this MI is what? A user assigned MI, and this user assigned MI is connected to our Key Vault where we have updated our secret. Okay, and in terms of implementation, what we have mentioned, we have created our secret provider class. In this secret provider class, we have mentioned about our tenant ID, our Key Vault name, I would say our MI ID detail, and the key which we are going to mention. And eventually, once we are going to create our pod, in this pod, we have mounted this one as volume. Okay. So with this, we have a detailed discussion regarding our secret management in Kubernetes. Okay. So thanks a lot for watching the video. Thank you.